Let me just adjust my levels here. Hey Google, turn the lights in my office to 50%. Let's get that lighting right. Oh, there we go, a little dark, but hey Google, turn the lights in my office to 70%. There we go, that's perfect. What's up everybody? Welcome back to the stream. Thanks for joining again. We're gonna kick it off with part 2 of our live coding session. We'll do a quick recap in the beginning in case you missed things. I'll be posting a link to the GitHub so you can follow along. But basically, we're going to be continuing building our React Native app. It is a craft beer cataloging app, but you can do whatever you want with it. We are going to be using React Native with Expo. We're going to be using TypeScript. And one of the big things that I started this project for was kind of just for myself to get experience with RecoilJS. It's a kind of a new state management system. It's an experimental Facebook project. It seems pretty cool. I want to give it a shot. I figured I might as well do that, and while I'm doing it, share it all with all of you and do it a little live so that people can see and check things out and maybe see if it works for them. So we'll start out, like I said, with a little recap and show you kind of what we're going to be building. So let me just go ahead and get that link to the GitHub. I'll paste that in the chat now. All right. So the project is called Brewbook React Native. The link will also be attached in the description, and I'll be posting this on YouTube as well. I posted the first video on YouTube. However, I do want to apologize. The quality was not where I wanted it to be. I was streaming from a different device, lower powered MacBook Pro. So hopefully this one, it's got the NVIDIA card. So hopefully this one will be a lot better. And I'll make sure, to keep improving as we go along. That was our first stream. We're only going to be getting better from there. So I posted the link to the GitHub repo. Feel free to clone it so you can follow along. If you do clone it, you will have to install Expo globally via NPM. If you need the commands for that, you can find those over here at expo.io. And right on their page, if you click Get Started, you'll see a link. Let me just go ahead and go to my main scene here. You'll see a link here to run this command, and you'll have to run that command. You may have to sudo it. I'll just go ahead and also paste that in the chat for folks so you have that. All right, so let's do a bit of a recap. So just some background again, we're gonna be building this app I designed here. Disclaimer again, I am not a designer. I kind of just mocked this up. I think I did okay. I'm trying out Figma, which seems to be pretty awesome. I had done some stuff with Sketch, and I think my lack of skills in Sketch kind of transferred over a little bit. But we have like a splash screen. And the general idea here is we're just building a basic app to catalog craft beers. And like I said, you can use that to catalog anything you want. If you're into wines, do that. If you're into different, seltzers, do that. If you're into books, video games, whatever, you can kind of customize it. The important things here is kind of like the skeleton and the infrastructure behind it. And so what I have here is just a basic app. We're going to have some beers. We're probably going to add some sorting. We're going to be adding some forms to add new things. Last time we got started by just scaffolding out the basic beginning parts of the app. So things like having the Expo set up, having TypeScript set up, getting the project all kicked off. We ran into a few bugs, which is pretty cool. You can go back and see how we handled those. We just did it how I would handle it. Like I said, I'm going to just be coding live. There's nothing here. It's not a tutorial by any means. You'll be, maybe you'll learn some stuff. I hope you do. But I'll be learning as well. We're going to be really just diving into this together. So it should be a lot of fun. So yeah, this is kind of what we're going with. I'll go over some of the code that we wrote last time. But just to go over the technologies again that we're going to be using, we have Expo. That's how we scaffolded out our native application. We're using RecoilJS, which is a new state management library, similar to something like Redux, but with a little bit of a nicer boilerplate, like a little less boilerplate. You're not making reducer files and action creators. And as useful as Redux is, and I think Redux is still one of the most useful state management tools for large projects, Recoil seems like it's pretty performant, and it's been used in a big project. If you get a chance, definitely check out this video on the RecoilJS website. It does a great job explaining. They do an awesome job kind of guiding through stuff and drawing things out. Maybe we'll do a little drawing here to kind of map out what we're doing. But again, we'll be using Recoil, we'll be using Expo, And we're using TypeScript for this. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, I wouldn't worry too much. It's a superset of JavaScript that's going to add typing, and you'll see, and sometimes it'll complain or kind of hint at us that something could be more explicit and we may be missing types, and we'll define that as we go. And when we don't know what we're doing, we'll just Google it. We're just here, we're just coding together. We're gonna have fun with it. At least I'm gonna have fun. I hope you have fun too. So, all right, so let's kind of recap a little bit of what we did last time. So I'm gonna pull up my VS Code here. So I have this project. Again, this was scaffolded out with that Expo project. I'm just gonna turn my lights up a little bit. It looks like it's a little low. Hey Google, turn the lights in my office to 100%. Let there be light. There we go. All right, so let's jump in a little bit. So to recap, we have our project scaffold here. You can see that we have our app.json. That's going to be the Expo configuration. It tells us about the name of our app, version numbers, where the icon is. We can change all that. It's all configurable. The background color, the splash screen. This is stuff that's kind of for the mobile app. Expo also has the benefit of scaffolding out a web app. So that should be pretty cool as well to see basically how, you know, the application performs on the web. And it's also really useful, I found, for debugging. So I'm also just going to open up a new window here. So basically what we'll be doing is kind of going through that a bit. We're not going to really do any changes to that at this time. So we'll just leave that as is. And let's see what we got here. All right, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to go ahead and look at our next piece. So it's our app.tsx. This is the entry point of our application. We are using the Expo application that comes out of the box with React navigation. For those of you, again, not familiar with React navigation, it's just a really good navigation library for React Native, but also for React. So it provides some really cool things, like you'll see the docs look very similar to the Recoil setup because they use a similar scaffold there. But it's really great. It allows you to create things like tabs, which we'll see in a minute, which is what, if we're going off our design, is what we're going to want here. So we have these tabs. So that should be pretty cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've done so far. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start my project. And with the new version of Expo CLI, to start my project, all I have to do is run npm start. So similar to what you do in a regular Create React app, but it's going to pop up this really cool Expo UI. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see a better view there. And what we have here is our iOS simulator run in web browser. I don't have an Android emulator installed. The default one was a little slow, so I usually stick to the web and the iOS simulator, but I have an Android phone and I will be able to do some tests on here using the Expo app, and I can, you know, pull it up and we can try that as well. The cool thing about having the Expo app on your device is you can just go in, scan the barcode with the app, and easily just kind of see what's going on and run it right on your phone. It's really great what Expo is able to do and add for you there. All right. So let's go ahead. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run web browser first, just so we can kind of take a look. And then I'll start up the simulator after that. So it's going to start up. It's going to compile the code. We're using TypeScript, so it'll give us any errors if there were errors there. And I'm just going to pop this into like a mobile view. So this is where we're at. Obviously, it looks nothing like the design, but we did it this way so we can kind of play around with Recoil and do some state management. Currently, we have a list of brews. These are all hard-coded. They're not coming from a database at this point. We might, at some point, actually make some requests. I think we're going to want to do that. Part of state management with React is being able to figure out what the asynchronous story is like for a particular state management system. So we'll see what that looks like. So right now you have a brewery with some hard-coded stuff and then a rating here on the right. And the plus and minus will actually up the rating on the different brews. And one of the things we set up last time is we set this state up to use Recoil, which I'll show in a second. But what I do want to show a bit right now is actually what the rendering is looking like, because we're going to improve that. That's going to be the first thing we do on tonight's stream. So I'm going to pull up my React Native dev tools. Got to have them. If you're working with React, these are a must-have. They are phenomenal, and you're going to see why. I click Components, and I actually have in my settings this option here, highlight updates when components render. You can click that, and the cool thing is it'll actually show you when a component's rendering. It'll outline it. So I'll click that, and then now if I hit plus, you'll notice all that blue part, that's the app re-rendering. So you can see, even though I'm just changing this one item, it's re-rendering the entire list. And that is not efficient when you start getting a large list. You don't want to re-render everything. You want to re-render just the pieces of the application that are changing. That's the benefit of React. However, there's a little legwork to actually make that work with Recoil, and we're going to show that in a second. So you can see here, I have it so that I can't go below 0 with the rating, and I can't go above 5. And you'll see that when I click these, the whole thing re-renders. So let's take a look at what it currently is set up like and see how we're going to modify it. So I'll pop this open. All right, so currently what we have is we have two main components. We have our brew list. That's where we're actually showing the list of brews, as we call them. And you can see here, the brew list is using brew list state from brew list state. And I put my atoms in a separate file. That's totally not necessary. You don't actually have to do that. I'm kind of just figuring this out as I go, and I'm sure some best practices will be established as the community starts using this more. But for now, I put it in a separate file. And so what we have here is my atom here called brew item rating state. And so this is for each individual brew, and the default rating is 0. And so each of our brews is using this as its atom to get its state. And then we have the brew list state, and this is where we have all the hard-coded brews. And so what's happening is we have this atom with this list of brews, and our brew list is using that list of brews and rendering that using a flat list. Flat list is very similar to any list component used on the web, like a LI, but it has the added benefit of, well, it renders to a native view, but also it does that cool thing where if you have a lot of items, it only renders what's in view. And as you scroll, it pulls more things in a very performant way. And the way that flat list works is you give it the data, and then you give it a function that can render an individual item. In this case, I have an item being passed in, and I'm rendering a brew item, which is this other component here. Now our brew item has the logic for actually manipulating that rating. And the way it does it right now is that a little bit inefficient where we're doing a lot of re-rendering. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to our brew item here. We have this, we have our prop specified, but what we're doing is we're using recoil state. That's how we're pulling in that atom. And we're pulling in the entire brew list state. So each of the brew items has the entire brew list state, which is not optimal, and we're going to improve that in a second. But so what I'm doing with that is I have my brews. I have the index. That's basically the index of the current brew I'm on, so I know what to render. And I basically find from that list of brews the current brew that I want to render. And we're rendering that info down here. And then the important stuff is when I click increase, the plus button, I call handle increase. And when I click the decrease button, I call it handle decrease. You might be saying, well, on press, that looks different. It's usually on click. With React Native, we use on press because, again, it was designed for mobile. So you're going to be pressing things. So it's just similar to on click. And so we're going to call handle increase. And this is where the actual updating happens. So what's happening here is handle increase is going to call update rating. It's going to increase the rating by 1, and this is going to decrease the rating. And what it's doing is this update rating function takes that new rating, which it's complaining because we haven't specified the type it is. We'll do that in a second. And it's calling update brew, or it's creating a new brew to update. And the way it does that is it grabs the current brew, changes the rating, and then it calls this replace item at index to replace the item in that array. And that's just doing some slice magic where it's getting out all of the items up to that index, putting in the new item, and then getting all the items after that index. So it's just inserting it at the point where it was. So the insert is happening because we know the index. But like I said, this is causing the entire app to re-render, which we don't want. We only want the atoms to worry about updating their atom or their state. And that's what we're going to dive into now and try to optimize this. But first, let's handle some of these TypeScript complaints. So this one's an easy one. It's saying new rating implicitly has an any type. We don't want that. We want it to have the actual type. So we're going to give it a type of number, which is what we're dealing with here. If you look at brews, it doesn't know the type of bruise, and that's because bruise is coming from use recoil state, and it is an array of brew items, but we haven't typed those out. But so what we can do for now is at least specify that it's going to be an array. And so one way we can do that is we could say bruise. We can give it kind of like a type here. We could say it's an array of any. Actually, I think what we'll have to do is specify it out here. So we'll leave it here because it has a implicit type of any, and once we start changing these things, we'll actually add the type. I'm not going to do it now because I'm going to be significantly changing this, and we're not even going to have bruise in this component. Okay, so we may be figuring out how are we going to get this to a point where it's not re-rendering everything and it's just re-rendering what we need. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try creating an atom for each item. So what does that look like? Well, I'm actually going to kind of draw this out. So I'm going to open up, let's open up a little draw IO so we can kind of draw through what this is going to look like. All right. Allow. All right, I'm going to create a new diagram. Let's do a blank diagram. Okay. Let's use the folder. That's fine. All right, so draw IO is pretty cool. It's a free, basically, tool where you can draw diagrams, flowcharts. It's great for use with work if you're trying to do like an architecture, and it's going to help us right now to kind of outline our state. So currently what we have is we have our state tree, which looks like this. We have our brew list. I'll zoom in a bit so we can see that better. Oh, not like that. I want to zoom in like this. Yikes. Okay, so we have our brew list. And our brew list renders many brew items. And I'll just kind of make those look like little squares here. And I'll just copy this and just kind of show what that looks like. Brew item 2, and we'll call this one brew item n, because we can have as many brew items as we want. The whole idea is to catalog here, so we want this list to grow a bit. And so what we'll do is I'm just going to create a relationship. So this thing is rendering all of these. And then in between, you have some, let's just say, put that there, and we'll just do ... because there's a bunch in between there. And let's go ahead and increase that so we can see that. Okay, so these are the kind of like the ones in between. And so right now, the way that our state is working is we have this atom basically list. And the way that Recoil is described is they describe it as the state manager being orthogonal to your component tree. So if you have your component tree like this, normally you have Redux, and Redux kind of sits outside and can connect. The way they want you to think about Recoil is that the state tree is orthogonal. So you have your components like this, if you were to lay it flat, and your state kind of sits above and can hook in like this. Looks weird, a lot of hand gestures. I'll explain it right now. So currently what we have is we have our atoms. Right now we have 2 atoms. The first one is our, I believe we called it brew list state. Not a very great name, but we'll get there. So we have our brew list state. And this one contains an array of brew objects. All right. And then we have our brew rating state, I believe we called it. Brew item rating state. Okay, so let's brew item rating state. And this is right now just a number. And there's many of these. There's one of these for each thing in that list. And each of these is connected to its corresponding brew item. So you can kind of think of it like this. Of course, I don't know how to do orthogonal graphs, but you can kind of get the idea. So each of these is connected to their corresponding brew item, like this. And that's not what I wanted. All right. And the brew state right now is currently being, if we look at our, you can see we're using the brew list state right from our brew item. So each item is actually modifying that brew list state. And I actually don't even know if we're using brew item rating anymore. Let me check. Let's see. I think we might have switched to be just using the, let's see. Yeah, so we're not even using it anymore. We're actually just using the list, and we're pulling items in the list and updating it. Where we want to get, though, is we want to get to a point where each brew item has its own state, and not just storing the rating, but also storing, you know, its name, its brewery, and its style. And each one will be tied to the ID of that item. So we could say for this one, it's, you know, 1. For this one, it's 2. Let me make these a little bit. Let me make this font a little smaller so it's easier to read. 8. Let's delete this. So this is what we want. And so the idea here is if each of these just has its own atom and it only cares about its own atom, then when it updates its atom, only it will re-render, because brew item 2 is not subscribed to brew item 1's atom, and brew item n is not subscribed to brew item 1's atom or brew item 2's atom. It will just be subscribed to its atom. But the downside to this is that our brew list would no longer know about the items that it is managing. So it won't be able to do things like give us a count. It won't be able to do things like removing items. Like we wouldn't have like a nice high level remove function. But there's a way to fix that. And if you watch the Recoil video, they do something similar where they're creating dynamic things. And this is where Recoil's power really shines, is creating these dynamic atoms. Currently our atoms are not dynamic, they're hard-coded, right? And they're hard-coded in here. But this will allow us to create those dynamic atoms, which is extremely important. So the way this is gonna work is, instead of keeping a list of objects in this brew list state, we're just going to keep the IDs of each brew. We'll make the IDs unique, but for now, let's just, as an example, I'll just put, you know, ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ... n. And so what we'll do is as we add brews, which we'll get to when we start adding brews, we'll create a new ID. And then from each of the brew items, when we add a brew, we'll add the ID here and we'll create a new item with that ID. And the way we'll do that is with an atom creation function, a function that will create atoms on the fly given an ID, which you'll see in a second. And so when we create an atom on the fly with an ID, we can then pass that ID to our brew item, and the brew item can say, hey, here's my ID. Let me go call use recoil state, pass it this ID, and get the atom that I want to deal with. And the cool thing about that is we can use selectors for that. So we can use a selector to grab that atom, and we can just take that ID and get the atom for that ID. So it's going to be pretty cool. And let's see how that's going to work. And then what ideally would happen is when we're going back to our function here and we are clicking here, we'll only see the brew that we're actually clicking update. And at this point, it's kind of a premature optimization, right? But this list is ideally going to grow. We're going to ideally add different brews. We're going to keep adding more. Thanks. Shout out Clam Watson, Brewbook, a true classic. Yeah, so Clam's been around. I've been using this example to try out different frameworks for a long time. So it's a fun one. And I think it kind of tests some of the cool aspects of different frameworks and different management libraries. So as we add brews, it's going to become more important, right? We don't want this whole app to re-render every time we add a brew. And this is just a better way to manage the state. And we can take advantage of Recoil, which is the whole purpose here, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive in and start managing that list of IDs. We're going to hard code it first, and then we'll eventually make it dynamic where we can add and remove. So the way we're going to start this out I will save this. I'm going to go to my brew item state. I'm going to just get rid of that for now. Open up my file list here. Okay. So here we have our brew list state. So right now we have an array of objects. We're going to change this to an array of IDs. We're going to create this array of IDs as we start, when you add a brew, a new ID will be inserted. When you remove a brew, a new one of the IDs will be removed. Sorry, not a new one. And so right now, this is not going to cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the hard-coded brews that we have here, and I'm going to move them into the brew list, and we're going to create this list and this atom from that list. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to move this out here. So now this has a default state of an empty array. I'm going to open up my brew list. And in here, I'm just going to define a constant that contains these. I'm going to call it brews. Okay. Now, I made it an object because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create unique IDs for each of these brews, and that's what we're going to use to generate those atoms. And for now, what I'll do is I'll just use the brewery and the brew name as the unique identifier. Ultimately, we'll be able to come up with some better unique IDs, but for now, this is going to be unique enough for our purpose, and we can tackle that when we get there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for this one, we'll call it boat, or sorry, we'll call it carton brewing boat. And then it might be useful to have that ID inside the object as well. So if we need that, we'll add that later. But so I'm going to just do this for each one. So bear with me. So here we have red tank. Move this a little bit. Get a better typing system. There we go. All right. Jester King, Le Petit Prince, fantastic table ale. Highly recommend. Okay. Now we have an object with IDs where each key or each property in this object represents the unique ID for a brew, and then we have the hard-coded brew. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pass this ID to each brew item, and that's this thing down here. So we have our brew items. So our data here is not going to come from Recoil state just yet. We're going to just go ahead and comment this out, and we're going to pass the brews right here. Data has to be an array, and since we just want to pass the IDs, we can create an array from that object. So I'll do that right now. Call it brew IDs. We'll just do object.keys, brew IDs. That'll give us an array of the keys. And then we can tell, it's going to ask us what the type is, so we can give it a type. So in this case, we're going to have an array of IDs. The IDs are strings. So we can do it's going to ask us what, let's see what this says. This says block scope variable brew IDs used before its declaration. Brews. Okay, so now we have brew IDs, and I'm going to go ahead and pass brew IDs here. So now this is going to break our code because we no longer have a name, we no longer have a rating, we no longer have a brewery, we no longer have a style, we don't have anything. That's because this info is, again, it's going to come from the atoms. So it's going to come from the atom we're going to create for each brew item. So let's do that. So first, let's modify brew item. I'm just going to open it up here. Let me zoom in a bit for everybody. There we go. Brew item. All right. And so what we're going to do is modify this. So now instead of taking all this info, it's just going to get the ID. And we can change the props here. Just be the ID. All right. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We need to create that atom from the ID. But we don't have the brewery, the rating, the style, or anything like that yet. So where are we going to get that? We have a few options. We can pass it in and use it to create that atom, and then we'll be subscribed to this atom, or we can create those atoms in advance, and we can do that in the brew list. We can create those atoms, and then in our brew item, just use the ID to grab that atom. So let's try that. Again, I've never done this before. This is my first time. We're going to try it, see if it works. I think it might. I watched that video. It seems like that's what they did, so let's give it a shot. All right, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and hold off on doing anything in the brew item just yet. So what I'm going to do here is for each of these brew IDs, I'm going to create an atom. Now, one of the things that's important is this brew list at some point is going to re-render. And we don't want to recreate that atom every time. So we're going to want to make sure that that's not happening. And the way we could do that is with a memoization function, which we'll get to in a bit. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an atom creating function. And for now, I'll put it out here, and then we can move it to a separate function. So we'll call it create brew state equals, and we'll go ahead and import atom from Recoil. Get rid of this for now. And it's a function that's going to take an ID, which is a string. And we can actually type this to, we can be specific. We can call this like a brew ID and make that a defined type that is a string. And that's probably something we'll do at some point. But so it's going to take an ID, and from that ID, it's going to create an atom. And the way we do that is, you can see here, we've done it before. You just call atom and you pass it a key and the default. But you can guess what our key is going to be. It's going to be the ID. So let's do that. So we call atom, give it a key. The key here is going to be the ID. And the default is going to be, we'll just make it an empty object, because we're going to put that name, brewery, rating info in there. The other thing we could do is we could just make it empty. For example, we could just have nothing, like a brewery, like the name will be an empty string. Let's try this for now. And we'll want to memoize this function so that we're not constantly recreating this. Okay, so we have our create brew state. And what we'll do is we'll create an atom for every brewery in the list. So to do that, we're going to loop over our brew IDs and call that. So the way we'll do that is we'll do brew IDs for each. Brew ID, create brew state, brew ID. All right, so now we should have an atom for everything in that list. Now, the only downside here is the atoms don't have that information. They're just gonna be empty. So let's go ahead and add that to our creator, where we can actually pass the default object. So we'll say here, we'll pass initial state. An initial state, it's gonna want a type. So let's use this time to create a type for our brew. And let's do that up here. And we had something similar in brew list, and we're using for brew item props, but let's do it here. We're gonna say name, string, brewery, string, rating, number, style, string. So now we have our brew type, and we can use that down here. Now we can say initial state is of type brew. And here we can do initial state. We can even call it, since they're calling it default, we can call it default. That might be even nicer. Default state. Sweet. Okay. So here it's complaining because it's like, hey, you passed it a brew ID, but you didn't pass it the, the actual state. So what we can do for that is we can actually just use a different type of looping, where we can loop over the brews and loop over each key value. So again, our brews is an object. So the way we'll do that is we'll say brews, and we'll wrap that in an object.entries, and that gives us the key values. And so what we'll get is a key and a value. And for each of those, what we'll do is we will call create brew state, the key, and the value. And we can actually say what this is. We could say this is the brew ID, and this is the default state. And it's just complaining here. It says that brew ID argument of type string is not assignable parameter type string. So it's actually got what we want here is the brew ID should be a string because we're doing object.entries. The default state it thinks is a number, which is not what we want. So let's look at what we're doing here. So brews is this object here. Object.entries is going to give us the key value pairs. If we map over those, oh, I see what happened here. It's going to give it to us like this in a tuple. So now we should have map, and we need this here, and then we need that here. Okay, so now if we look and hover, brew is going to be a string. It's the brew ID. Default state is going to be this type of object here, and it's showing that there's a list of them. So it's pretty cool. And so you can see here we're passing a brew ID and a default state. We can even specify that the default state is of type brew, which would be saying that basically each of these is of type brew. So let's see what it does when we tell it that. So it's saying here tuple, because it's trying to map the whole tuple. So what we can do is we can type the whole tuple, and we can say the tuple is of type string, comma, brew. So now we know our tuple is of type string, comma, brew. So now when we hover here, it says that it's a brew, which is good. That's what we want. All right, so now we have all of these atoms created. So we should be able to use these atoms. So let's give it a shot. And so what we're going to do again is we have this list of brew IDs that we're passing to our brew item, and let's actually do that here. ID item dot ID. Actually, in this case, it's just item because that's the only thing in our data list. And we also need to pass, when you have a lot of items in a list in React, you always want to also pass a key. And in this case, we're lucky. We could just use our item as the key. Okay. So now we have to modify our brew item. So our brew item now is only getting that single prop, the ID, right? And in fact, I want to call this brew ID, just to be explicit, because ID is an attribute in HTML, so I don't like to mix that with JSX if not possible. So we have our brew ID, it's a string. We can comment out this right now. We're not going to use that right now. You're going to see it's going to be a lot easier to update these things. I hope, right? Again, we're going to find out. You understand? It's going to be cool. All right, so here's the plan. We're taking in our ID. Again, we got to call it a brew ID. We got to be explicit about that. Now, we no longer need this. We're not going to be pulling the whole list. That's the whole point of this. We're just going to pull what we need. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is comment this out, and we're going to actually pull from that atom. We're going to grab the atom using the ID. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use recoil state. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass it, instead of this brew list state, we're going to use this atom here. So in this case, the key is the ID. If you remember, the key here was the name, brew list state. Now we're using dynamic keys. This is why it's cool. At least I think it's cool. All right. You might not think it's cool. It's pretty cool. Come on. Don't be crazy. All right. So I know you're getting excited. I am too. It's going to happen. This is going to be dynamic. It's going to be cool. We're using recoil. Let's get into it. So what are we going to call use recoil state with? The ID, the brew ID. That's the plan. What is it saying? It's complaining. Let's see what it says. Argument type string is not assignable to parameter type recoil state unknown. What? Let's see. What is that? Because here we actually imported that atom. right? We actually imported that atom from brew list state. So if you look at that, we exported that atom. So we'll actually need to figure out a way to pull this atom by the ID. I know we can use this key to look it up. We just got to figure out how to do that. So let's take a look at the Recoil Docs. This is why it's fun. We're learning it together. It's cool. So let's see. All right. So here we define an atom. That's great, but it's not dynamic. This is just a hard-coded atom. We want to get to something that's a little more dynamic. So it might be a matter of, let's see, to-do list state. We probably need a getter or like a selector. Let's try that. Let's see how the selectors work. To-do list state, key is to-do list filter state. It's an atom. Here we have a selector. The selector grabs the filtered to-do list state. That's the name of that. It's got a get function. It takes this as an argument. Const filter get to-do list filter state. So it's grabbing that to-do list filter state. It's grabbing the to-do list state, and it's returning some stuff. So we need a way to grab an individual item. So let's see. Let's see what we're doing here. Use recoil state, to-do list filter state. On change. Okay, we don't want that. Get to-do list state. Okay, let's see. Guys, let's go here really quick. Actually, let's look at atoms for a second, because this is what we're dealing with, a bunch of atoms. So to-do list item, this is an example where they're using a to-do list item. This is kind of what we had before, where they're doing like the splicing and removing stuff. It's not really dynamic at this point, but I know we can do this because it was in the video. So we're gonna nice, good job, Clam. Hell yeah. All right, so let's see how we can get to that dynamic atom. So let's see. One thing we might have to do is, because we're creating those atoms dynamically, we might have to store a list of those somewhere where we can actually pull them down, or even potentially just name them based on the ID, and then we can potentially grab it. So let's see what happens. So first, let's look at how we're creating it. So we're creating it again with this creator function, takes an ID, returns a new atom with a key. So we need to be able to leverage that. So here we're able to import it because we had our list of atoms. But what we'll probably want to do here is store these somewhere so that we can actually grab them. So that's what we got to figure out how to do. So I'm going to quickly pull up the recoil video that they had on the blog, because that's where I actually saw this initial state thing. I'm just going to fast forward to the part where they're doing that. Let's see. Pull this up on YouTube. Classic live debugging. Let's do it. All right, let's see. So they do something here where they're doing something very similar, where they're creating these nodes on the fly. I'll pull that up here. Let's see, it should be coming up here. No, not there. It's here. Item with ID. So they're creating this. They're creating a constant for it called item with ID, where they're memoizing that function, which again is something we're going to do. That's what I mentioned before. And let's see how they're actually using it. So just to see what they're doing one more time, basically they have this function that takes an ID, creates an atom, just like what we did. They did preference it with item in front, and we could definitely do something like that. But for now, we're just using the brew ID. They memoize it so that this isn't being recreated every time. Function memoization, if the same arguments are provided to a pure function, it doesn't need to recompute. And they're calling it item with ID. So we have a name for ours. I believe we called ours something silly like create brew state. So instead we'll call this brew with ID. And let's see how they're actually leveraging this. So they're calling it like a function. Item with ID. And I guess what's going to happen is it's going to return that atom. It's because the atom was already created. That's perfect. So let's try that out. So let's do let's import this. So we're gonna have to export this. And at this point, we might want to consider moving this to a different file, but let's just try it from here for now. And so this is going to come from the brew list file. So we can do /brew list, and we're pulling in brew with ID. And here we're calling use recoil state brew with ID, and we're going to give it the brew ID. And let's see what this is saying. Argument of type void is not assignable to parameter of type recoil state unknown. Expected 2 arguments got 1. Okay, so let's see what use recoil state's expecting. So use recoil state expects a recoil state unknown. Let's see if we can actually specify here that this is, you know what? Also, brew with ID takes 2 things. It takes the ID, but also the default. And in our case, the default is basically the item, like the entire brew. So for now, I'm going to see what happens if I just provide nothing. It might end up recreating that atom, and so we'll have to figure out how to actually put that state in there. So let's see. What is it saying here? So it needs to be of type brew. And remember, a brew type contains all of these things. So in this case, this isn't going to work because what's going to happen is we don't know that info. The whole idea of this is that this info is created outside and able to be updated here. So what we can do is a few things. We can keep our brew with ID function where we can create atoms and have them map to an ID. And we can do that creation within our brews. And then we can use our hard-coded list to start that. So we have our hard-coded list. We use that to create the atoms by passing that to the brews. The brews each create their own atom and their own component states. They're managing their own component state. And then if the brew list needs access to that component state, it could then pull that info using a selector. So for now, what we're going to do is instead of having all of that info being created here, we're just going to move this. We're going to do the creation of this from our brew item, see if that works. So what that means is now we want to pass that info to each of the brews. And then that also means we don't need to create this list right now. We're going to go ahead and comment this out. We're not going to use this right now. So instead, what we're going to do is pass to our actual individual brews all of that info. So instead of just passing the brew IDs, we're going to pass 2 things. We're going to pass the brew itself, like all of the info, as well as the brew ID. So to do that, we can create our new data object. So in this case, our data is going to look like this: brews, and we're going to want to grab the object.entries. And for that, we're going to map over that. And when you map over that, you get a tuple with the key and the value again. The key here is the brew ID, and the value is the brew. Or we can call it the default state if we want. We're just going to call it the brew info or something. And we can specify the types there as well. And we'll do that. So the type for brew ID, it'll infer it, but we can be explicit and say, you know, that's going to be a string, and that's going to be of type brew. Let's see what it's, oh, I have to do that outside. Sorry about that. Because we're dealing with a tuple. So this needs to go out here. So we have type string, type brew. Okay. So now this all has to be wrapped in this here. Brews. Okay. So now what our data is going to be is for each of these items, we're going to just return brew ID. And then we're going to spread brew info. So now we're actually putting the ID on the object that we're sending. So then in here, we're going to specify our type now again is going to be, it's going to contain all of these things. So we could say our props take a name, a string, a brew ID. And here we can pull each of those out. Name, brewery, rating, style. And then we can pass each of those to our brew with ID function. So for that, what we'll do is we'll do brew with ID, name, brewery, rating, style. And so it's complaining here, so let's take a look in a second. Let's see what that's doing. But first, we want to make sure we're passing all this to the brew item. So given the item, the key is item.brewID. It's going to say here, brew ID does not exist in type string. So, because item right now, it thinks it's type string, and that's because we need to pass it data. And then we need to make sure we're passing the rest of the arguments here. So we have our key, our brew ID. We're going to have our name. We're going to have our brewery and style. So what I'll do here is I'll just do this. And we'll just do item.name, item.brewery, and item.style. Okay. So now it's saying, let's see, what else does it need? So our brew item needs brewery, name, style, rating, of course. We want to make sure that we have rating in here. Good. So we'll also give it a rating. Okay. So now here within our brewery, we have all those items. Let's see, brew with ID. So here, let's do this. Let's pull this out here. Just get rid of this and make sure we're creating this appropriately. So brew with ID, let's see what it's complaining about. We need to give it 2 arguments. We gave it 0. So our first argument is the brew ID, and the second one is the brew. So in this case, it's going to be name, brewery, rating, style. And let's see what it's saying now. So it says argument type void is not assignable to parameter type recoil state unknown. Brew with ID takes an ID and a brew. So let's make sure it knows first that this is a brew. And let's see if it complains, because we need to export that type. Let's do that first. So we're going to export that type from here, import it over here. So now we actually have that type to use. Let's hover over it and see if it knows about that. Brew only refers to a type, but it's being used as a value. That is not what we want. So let's make sure that it knows we're using it as a type. So we can even do something like this. So pop that out, put it over here, and specify that it's of type brew. Okay, so we're still running into this use recoil state thing where it's complaining about this argument of type void is not assignable to parameter of type recoil state unknown. So let's see. Here, they're using use recoil state, item with ID, which seems to be working fine. Let's see if we can see with TypeScript what's going on here. Maybe we just need to specify a particular type. Maybe we just need to specify that this is a parameter of type recoil state unknown. So use recoil state unknown. It's going to return a type of unknown. So actually what we need to do is probably tell it what kind of type it's going to return. So we're actually going to return a brew. So we'll say, we're going to call this initial state. Or I think in recoil they call it default state, right? So let's do that. Cool. And then here we'll call it default state. There, so we got our default state. Here we call this brew, and it's going to be of type brew. Use recoil state is going to return type brew. Okay. We don't need this right now. We're not going to be using this just yet, so let's just get rid of that. And let's see what it's saying now. Use recoil state brew. It's It's going to give a brew and a setter or updater that updates the brew. And it's saying here that argument of type void is not assignable to parameter type recoil state brew. That's because brew with ID returns void. We can fix that. We can fix that two ways. We can get rid of this. Or we could just return this thing by saying return. Okay, so now it's saying expected. We're just missing that. Okay, so now we have our brew. Let's see if it worked. Let's see if we actually have this brew, if we can actually use this item to render the list, and if we can modify it without making everything re-render. So the next thing we have to figure out is, okay, how are we going to modify the state? Well, with atoms, you get a setter function where you can modify them. So the way you get that setter function is you pull it right out of reuse recoil state. So we can say set brew item. Or we can even call it update brew, but generally we call it set with hooks. So we'll pull that out. And here what we'll do is we'll get rid of this stuff. We don't need this stuff right now. We do want to handle increase. We do want to handle decrease. But we'll be changing the way we implemented that. So let's just comment this out for now. We don't need this. I'm just going to delete that. And down here, this is just complaining because we didn't have an image source. But down here, we'll want to actually mention all of these things. We don't want to use the ones being passed in. We now want to use the ones from the brew. So from the brew itself. So again, recoil is kind of like taking local component state and putting it in a place where other people can look into it. It's giving them like a way to look into it. So it creates this atom that's holding local component state orthogonal to your React component tree. We'll see. We'll see. It seems like a lot of ceremony. We'll see how it works. I think it is ultimately going to simplify things, but I guess because we're getting new and kind of new to this, just trying to figure things out, eventually probably it'll become a lot easier. Just like Redux, initially creating reducers and getting a feel for that was a big step. And I think once we kind of get this going, we can simplify it and see how we can improve these things. But yeah, let's see. All right, so we got our brew, our set brew, our update. I think we're going to keep these functions, but again, we're going to change these down here to reference brew.name because we want them to reference the atom, brew.brewery, brew.style, brew.rating, brew.rating, brew.rating. Okay, now our update function. It still makes sense to have a generic update function to do the increase and decrease. Maybe it doesn't. But instead of updating it with our replace item and index, we're just going to call that setter. So it still makes sense to have, still makes sense to have this update brew. And what we're going to do here is updated brew is our brew, right? Not brews at index. We don't need to do that anymore. It's our brew. And it's our new rating. Makes sense. And what we're going to do is we're just going to call set brew item with that new updated brew. Set brew item with that new updated brew. All right. Let's see what happens. So now we should be able to increase, decrease. Again, our list doesn't know anything about our atoms yet. It just initially created them. To walk through what happened is that we initially created the list, we used that to pass that to the brews, and we let the brews create their own local component state. But instead of it being local component state, they created atoms. The benefit of that is other components can now use information from those atoms. And the other benefit is we're not changing our brew list. Ideally, we're just updating it locally. So let's see if it, well, first renders, right? That's step one. Let's see what happens. So we got some, let's see if it'll compile. So let me go over here. Let me cancel that. Let me rerun it. npm start. Let's see what happens. All right, so while that's loading up, let's go through a little bit about what's going on. So what we're looking for here is we're looking for when we update the brews, that the entire list doesn't re-render. And we'll use that React Dev Tools to see if that's actually the case. If it's not, we'll keep messing around with it. First impressions, definitely some little learning curve in the beginning, getting a feel for that. I think ultimately it ends up with less code. You can already see we don't have a reducer file. We don't have an action creator file. That said, you know, when you build a small app, you didn't need Redux originally, so component state was fine. So I think where we're really going to run into things is when we start to scale this. So let's see how far we get with it and when we'll actually really start seeing the benefits here. But so far, if it does this, if it actually solves this problem where we're able to update those individual components without re-rendering the whole list and have the list get some information about those components, that would be great. One way we can test that is we can do an average rating calculator on the list level. So the list level will keep track of the average rating of the brews in the list. And as you update the rating, ideally just that counter would update and the brew items. So we'll see. Looks like we're stuck here on something. Let me take a look at what's going on here. So I'm going to run a web. Okay, it's compiling now. Forgot to click it. And let's see how this goes. All right, screen does not exist. Let's see what errors we got. Likely some TypeScript things, but we can resolve those. So we pop over to here, and we'll see what it says. It's still compiling. So let's wait a little bit. So the other reason, we're using TypeScript a bit, and you can see some of the things that it's telling us to do to be explicit about our types. The benefit there is when you're dealing with code, you don't have to be guessing what a particular variable is and what type it is. It adds some safety. It also makes sure that you account for a situation where a variable or constant isn't the type you believe it is. Especially when you dive into asynchronous coding, where you're getting into a case where you're dealing with promises or a value that might not be defined yet because you're doing an async wait and waiting for a response. It kind of forces you to handle that case. Almost, we call them maybe types in functional languages because it may be present or it may be null. Not all languages have null, JavaScript does, and it's an extra hurdle that we have to handle, but it also could be useful in some cases. So it's still compiling. I want to take a look because it's taking a little longer than I expect. So let's see, it could be something with our code. I just want to see if there's anything that could be causing that to take so long. Let me try closing this and retelling it to open the web browser. I'm also going to run it on the iOS. Oh, okay, so that was the case. I should have just closed that window. All right. Moment of truth. Check that out. It's not updating. No, you can see it. It is. I'm clicking it. It's only going up 1, and now it's gone -1. So our update function's a little whacked. We can fix that. So something's happening there, but you can see that it is it is only rendering the one thing. It's just not doing what we want. Let's check that out. Let's look at the logic there. So the logic on our increase and decrease is on the plus we call handle increase, on the minus we call handle decrease. We disable it if the brew rating is greater than or equal to 5. We don't want to let them go above 5. And we disable it if it's less than or equal to 0. The interesting thing here is when we call update rating, we're passing it the new rating. And here we're updating the brew with the new rating. And we're calling set brew with updated brew. So let's put a breakpoint here and dive in and see why it's not going above 1 and also why it is getting us -1. Actually, I know why. The reason why is because we're using rating here. Rating is the initial thing that's passed into the prop. We want to use brew.rating. And the reason it was 1 and -1 is because when that's passed in, it defaults to 0. So let's do that. Clam Watson says ship it. Yeah, let's definitely. It's got so much value. As long as we can add value to the business, we're good to go. So let's see. So we're going to save that and we're going to take a look. Let that reload. Let's take a look at our brew here. It's compiling. Get rid of that. Let's go back here. Let's rerun on web. That seemed to make it work better. Okay. All right, so there we go. So we have our list here, and when I click this, awesome. Only this one is updating, so the whole list is not updating. This is great. So it's already an improvement. However, we could have achieved this with React local state. 100% increase on being able to increase ratings. Nice, yep. So the this could have been achieved at local component state. We're not benefiting at all right now from Recoil, at least from what we want. What we want to be able, the benefit here is we want the list to be able to update some portion of it and know about it without re-rendering. With traditional component state, if you had to use if you had your list rendering your brews, right? So your list is rendering out all those brews. Let's go back to our diagram. Your list is rendering out all those brews. If you add a brew or remove a brew from this list, it'll re-render everyone, right? Because your list that you're passing down got modified. In Redux, if you modified this list, right? You added an item, you removed an item, well, this is going to re-render, forcing these to re-render. You might be able to say, well, you can memoize these, so if they don't change, they don't actually re-render, but it's going to try, right? So the benefit here is we're currently just re-rendering each one, but we want to try rendering something else up here, or modifying something up there that needs to know about the children. And so that's why I think doing this average rating thing will be pretty great. Clam Watson said, pretty sick to avoid all the Redux boilerplate. For sure. I think we've already seen that benefit. I've put everything in one file right now. I think eventually we'll see the community kind of settle on best practices. Maybe people put atoms in different places. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just great to keep it next to the code. We've also seen that movement of everything in one file. You got your style components, you got your types. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But so far, definitely nice not having a reducers folder, an action creators folder, the reduction of the boilerplate, not having to worry about the best practices around using a payload. Do I call it payload or do I specify what's in the payload? So I think we're going to see more benefits as we get into a more more critical app than an app that renders out a bunch of orange circles where images should be in some ratings. But let's check it out. So again, what I want to do is I want to learn, I want to add some information to the list so we can figure out how to use that atom. So let's do that. So I'm going to jump back over here. So, okay. So we have that list of breweries, and it's using those IDs. So we have the IDs. So with those IDs, in theory, we should be able to get the atoms, right? Because we can call this function. But the problem with that is brew with ID currently takes a brew and the default state. And so we're not going to be able to just grab the atom from the parent unless we know the default state. So we might want to change the atom getter so that we don't need to pass it the default state every time. So one thing we can do right now is we can modify our brew with ID to just take the ID and call set brew with ID here and actually update that that value. So if you look at how that works, let's look at how that works. Basically, what we would do here is not pass this. And we change our atom here to just be default state of blah, 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 empty. We wouldn't pass this. We just pass the string. So that's just the string to create our thing. Here we have brew with ID. Let's see, it's probably telling me empty is not compatible with type brew. So what we can do is we can say, we'll just initialize it empty right now. And then what we can do later is we can make it a brew or null. So that's another option for making empty ones. So let's do this, brewery style L. Well, everything's an L now. And rating, we'll default to 0. Okay, so now it's going to let us do that. We'll change this to be null so that it doesn't make sense to have empty things like this. Maybe it does. It's just the default. We're going to change it right away. And now what we're going to do is right after we pull that info, we're just going to call set brew item with, what do you think? Our name, brewery, rating, style. Because our set brew item, that function, look, you can see the arguments right here. It takes the type of brew because it wants to be able to update it. So now we have this atom that we can get with this, and we have a way to update it. Let's see if our thing still works. Is it going to make me do that thing where oh my god, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the simulator. Looks cool. makes us feel like we're real coders, real mobile coders, only the realest mobile coders in here. On an iPhone X simulator, could use anyone. I like the notch. I actually don't like the notch, but I like working with the notch because it's annoying, and we make sure our stuff looks good on that, because otherwise you ship it. I've done this, and then they're like, it doesn't look good with the notch, and you have to be like, oh well, the notch is whack. Get a Samsung, yo. I have a Samsung. It's got a little notch. It's got a little dot. That's cool though. Doesn't interfere. We've gotten used to the notch though, so we'll deal with it. All right, so while that's loading, let me just recap what I just did. I know I just did it, but you might want to know what I just did just now. I modified the atom so that instead of having to pass it that initial brew, we don't want to do that because we want to be able to just get the atoms by ID. So instead what I did is I just initialized it empty. You can just get the atom with the ID. And what I'm doing in each brew is immediately after getting the brew, I just update it. I update the atom with what was passed in. It's not going to be a performance hit because it's just going to happen immediately. Nothing will have happened at that point. It'll just update it pretty instantly. So, whoa. We got a red screen of death. Let's see what is going on here. Whoa. This is great. No errors, nothing. Just a red screen. All right, let's do this. Probably because I haven't used Expo on here in a while. Let's go ahead and just delete the Expo app and restart it. So we'll get that going. And in the meantime, I will close the web one and open that so we can mess with it there in the meantime. All right. It also might just be an error, so hopefully the web one will show us the same error if that's the case. And so what's happening now is Expo's installing there. That's pretty cool. And on this side, we're getting building JavaScript bundle. We can see there's a bunch of console bugs. Let's see what they are. Can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. That's what's happening right here. That's us trying to do this right here. So one thing we can do is we can move that to the use effect. So the use effect hook, we're going to use this right now to replace the componented mount. And we'll see. There may be a weird thing where it flashes empty and then appears. Unlikely. But we'll see. Red screen doesn't render around the notch. This is BS. Yeah, see? We hate the notch. Let's see, does it? Oh my gosh. Look at this. It's great. I'm actually not sure what is happening there. It was working before. Let me see. Extra info. Give me something. All right, we'll skip that for now. We'll go back to that because we got to get this working on there. Oh, it's probably just obviously this error, but for some reason it's supposed to show you the error messages there. It's probably just the notch. I blame the notch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just instantiate this with an empty array. It's going to basically be a componented mount. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call setBrewItem, and I'm going to pass it all that great stuff. I thought I copied it. Oh, it's right here. Let's just go ahead and get rid of it. Put it here. All right. Go away. Let's open up web. Let's open up iOS. Ooh, that looks great. We should just ship that version. I like the design there. It's pretty close. You can see the design's getting very close to this that I have here in Figma. It's very close. We're almost there. All right. Let's go back in a little bit. So let's see what we got here. Okay. So we made that change. Let's see if everything still works. Duplicate atom key. This is because we didn't memoize that function. We're definitely want to do that. There's a few ways to do that. We can write our own memoize function. It is fun. It is a fun thing. Maybe one day we'll do a video on that where we write our own memoize function. It is super fun, but we're not going to do it now. We're just going to pull memoize or something. I don't want to pull in all of Lodash. You don't need all of Lodash, right? Like, yo, some of you are pulling in all of Lodash and you're using the get function. Get out of here. Don't even. You can use the question mark now. Optional chaining. You don't need to pull in all of Lodash for the get function. I know you're doing. I know you've been doing it. All of you've done it. All of you 0 people in the chat have done it. Just kidding. What? All right, so let's see what's going on. So it's letting us do this, but blah, blah, we're getting these errors. Let's get rid of those now. Let's get rid of the duplicate shit. So let's memoize that. So to do that, I'm going to pull in Memoize, which is an NPM module. It's pretty nice. It gives us the ability to memoize a function. We can't use React Memo because React Memo is for memoizing a component. We're going to be memoizing a function. So you can see here, import Memoize, and you call Memoize on it. It's pretty neat. So let's go ahead and install this. It'll work with React Native because, again, we're just writing JavaScript for these things. There's nothing native about this portion of it, so we're just going to use this. All right. Copy that. Very cool. Look, lets you copy it. So we're going to go down here. We're going to cancel our bundler for a second. Go ahead and we're just going to run a -- save to make sure we save it to our package.json. I think by default it does that now. Don't quote me on that. But always good to be explicit, right? Why not? All right. Halo 3 launched today on PC, so I definitely will be playing that in a bit. So we'll be on here, I think, till about 10:30. Oh, Clem Watson with npm check.js. Yes, my first thing that I posted on npm. Prior to optional chaining and Lodash get everywhere, we had a use case. I was using CoffeeScript one day. I was like, this question mark is fantastic. The company I work for that shall remain nameless unless Kyle puts in the chat. I'm not going to run against him if he puts anything in the chat. But we had some long if statements, and we used check.js, this phenomenal library used by a major big company now in production. But you don't need it anymore. You don't need check.js. You just use optional chaining. It's fantastic. Maybe we'll get to use it at some point. Used by 1S Fortune 500. Yes. Very good. All right, so we got that now. So let's pull in Memoize. All right, and we're going to memoize. Oh, let's see what it says. Because I spelled it wrong. Ah, do they not have, are they only using, please tell me they're not exporting it that way. Yikes. Okay, so let's try this. It's kind of gross. All right, let's see. Type declarations. Wait, let me see if that's just the case because I can just install the types for that. Okay, okay, so I just need to install the types. Remember we did this for Recoil? It actually gives you the line here. You're just going to check. If it doesn't exist, it'll tell you right away. And if you do run into a case where a library you're using doesn't have type declarations, it's a really fun experiment, and maybe we can do it on one of these to implement them. Fun. You may find it fun. You may find it miserable. No, it's pretty fun. It's fun and it's useful. Like if it's something you use, you see the types aren't there, you want to contribute to open source, that's a fantastic project to do it. Everyone contributed definitely typed. We appreciate you. You're doing an awesome job, and you're making it easy for us to use our favorite libraries with TypeScript. So I'm assuming this one's going to have it because it's a pretty big library. Watch, now that I've said that, it's not going to have it. And we're going to save dev on this because we don't need this to be bundled. This is just for development. Come on, fingers crossed. It'll tell you right away if it doesn't have it. Looks like we're good. There's so many. There's so many. If anything that's popular, you're going to find it. It's great. So we're still getting error. It's probably something silly, and we're good. Okay, so now we're going to memoize this function. Whoa. We just wrap it. That's all we do. And again, we might implement Memoize at some point. I'm sorry, I messed this up. We're going to Memoize this whole thing. And we might implement Memoize at some point. It's really cool. But basically what it's going to do is when you have functional programming and you're dealing with pure functions, a pure function has the properties where if you're giving it the same arguments, it will always return the same output, meaning there's no side effects. So if you have a function that adds two numbers and it takes an x and a y, if you give it 5 and 5, every time that function will return 10 if it's doing proper math. It will never do other things or have some weird side effects or change those values or mutate them. It's going to be pure. So it's going to make sure the inputs render the same outputs. So we can memoize a function like that because we can say, hey, we've added 5 and 5 before. We know the result is 10. We've cached that result. If you call it again with 5 and 5, we can just return you the cached result. We don't need to reinvoke that function. And then down here, this is complaining because I need to put this here. So now we have a memoize function. So now let's take a look and see if our thing is not going to complain anymore. It's going to complain. Oh, also, I need to restart my thing. I should probably just do it in another terminal so I don't have to do that. Live and learn. Always, yeah, you always got to wrap functions in memoize. I'm sure that's what you're referring to. All right, web browser. Let's open up the iOS simulator again. Let's give it a shot. All right, let's see what we got here. This thing, come on. Come on, buddy. All right, so let's see what we got now. So our console is not cluttered with a million errors, and that's because we are memoizing. Yay! This is great. It's great. So we're not recreating those atoms. There's a cache of the atoms we've created for each ID, and when we call it again, it just gives you the existing one. It's fantastic. And again, you can see just this is rendered. That's because we haven't changed anything. So now let's go back to our list and actually add some functionality that will look at all those items. When they update, it will modify it something, but it won't re-render the whole list. So for now, what we'll add is an average rating. Be careful. What are we going to do if we have our list of IDs? We're going to use that to pull each of the atoms. Let's take a look at what that's going to look like. So we're going to create a new piece of the brew list. I'm just going to put it, I'm going to put it up here. We could also put it outside the brew list, but I think for the purpose of like demonstrating that we can change the brews without updating the brew list, we'll do it in here. So let's do it right above the brew list. So let's make it pretty basic. Right above our flat list, we'll just do a text component. Again, this is React Native. We're going to use text components. And we will say average rating. And we'll just provide it with average rating, which we'll define in a minute. And we'll just style this. Style equals. And we'll go ahead and down here, we'll create another thing called average rating. And we'll get fun with it. We'll say font size. Do something crazy, 40. Color, we're gonna use my favorite color, tomato. I think you had to put it in strings. Tomato is my favorite CSS color. You'll find that. I used it already last time. You're gonna see me use it again. It's a good color. It's like a reddish, you don't care. All right, average rating. So let's go up here and let's do styles dot average rating. And we gotta create this. How are we going to do it? We're going to pull it from our atoms, right? So there's a few ways to do this. The recommended way is to use something called a selector. A selector, if any of you have used Redux, if you've gotten to big projects where you have a lot of data in your store and you have a lot of properties that you want to compute, computed properties, you may have pulled in something called reselect. There's a popular library for selecting different attributes from your store and putting them together in one accessor. Also popular because it handled memoization for you. Yes, so if you requested full name for an ID or a user and you gave it the same user ID and it already had computed the full name by grabbing the first name and the last name off the store and giving it to you, it wouldn't redo it because it was memoized. That was a selector. You didn't have to use reselect though to create a selector. You could create that yourself. It was just a function that knew how to access different properties on the store and compute them. And the reason we use selectors and not just store the computed properties is because we store less and we make sure that our computed properties are actually derived from the store. So you have less duplication, less surface area to create errors, right? You could have your full name at some point get messed up, or you've messed it up. You forgot to set the full name in one place, forgot to set the full name at that point. With recoil and with reselect and selectors, we make sure we're deriving that from the properties. So with recoil, as we make a change to a component, we set that brew. We can think of it as calling basically like set state on that brew for everyone using it. And we're going to use the selector to take a look at each of our brew atoms and pull out the average rating. We don't need to store that. It is a product, or it is a function of each of the ratings of the brews, which are already stored in atoms in our recoil state, or atoms, if you want to call it that. So let's create a selector. And this is something we wanted to try out. So we're going to get that opportunity right now. So we'll pull up the good old Recoil Docs and let's take a look at selectors, and we'll walk through it together. So selectors. Selector represents a piece of derived state. So they call it derived state. That's a good way to put it. I called it like a computed property. You can think of derived state as an output of passing state to a pure function that modifies the given state in some way. Like I mentioned, you could take full name as an example, a pure function that takes a first name and last name and returns to you the full name. So first name space last name comma first name if you're on some government site, whatever. It's a powerful concept because it lets us build dynamic data that depends on other data. In the context of our to-do list application, oh wow, they built a to-do list application. That's kind of what we're doing, but you know, whatever. Filter to-do list. So the way they're using it is actually really cool. They're using it to filter the to-do list. So they're saying, hey, why would we make or store the filter to-do list? We just want to take the actual to-do list, filter it, and return that. We don't need to store that. We'll just do it when it's required. So they have an example here. They have their filtered to-do list filter state. This is just the state that stores what filter is being applied, because maybe their UI has a filter button. The default is show all, so there's no filter. And then they're using to-do list filter state, this thing, and the list of the to-do list state. So they get the actual list itself. So what filter, show all, maybe show completed, and the list of to-dos, all the to-dos. And they're going to build this selector. So let's see how they did it. So they call selector, which is just like atom, but you call selector. You give it a key. We're used to that. We did that with our atoms. And a get function. And so this is where it gets interesting. Pun totally intended. Totally. So it looks like this function takes a get. It gives you a get function. And then you can use that get function to grab another atom. Great. We're going to do that. And a list. The list. And a switch case. So it's doing a switch case. So in our case, we'll do the math here. So that gives me an idea. So we can definitely get the atoms. But remember, each one has unique IDs. So we need that list of IDs to actually get that average. So we have a few options. We can store that list of IDs, which ends up giving us some duplicate data, which we might not want to do. So we could store that list of IDs. Then we end up having the IDs there and the IDs in the local component state. We know that we currently have our IDs in our brew list because that's where we created them. Maybe we can pass them to the selector, just like we did with the ID before. So let's see what we can do there. We could probably just use the list of IDs because they're scoped outside of where we're going to create the selector. Let's see what happens. Let's mess with it. We'll try to get a good API for this. We want to make sure we're not doing anything sketchy. So let's go here and create that selector. I'm just going to basically copy this boilerplate and we'll modify it. So here we have our atom. I'm going to call this average brew rating state. It's a selector. Its key is the same thing. Get. What does it say about get? I want to see what it says about get. Ah, okay. And we need to import this. So I think once we import it, it'll know what it is. But we'll see. We may not. So this is going to come from Recoil. Okay, so now it knows. Good, good, good. It knows that it's a get recoil value. Awesome. This doesn't exist, so we need to loop through those IDs and get all of the atoms with those IDs. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll say brews equals, and remember we have the IDs up here. So we'll do, let's try this. Let's see if this works. Object.keys brews dot for we're gonna map because we're gonna get each atom, and we're gonna return get, and we'll get the object.keys is gonna return us the keys. So our map, first we get our key, which we're actually calling brew ID, right? We've been calling it that. And then what we're going to return is we're going to get brew ID. And so it's going to say that doesn't know what brew ID is. Argument type string is not assignable parameter. That's because we need to use our brew with ID function here. Brew with ID, brew ID. Okay, so now we have brews. Okay, now we need to get the average, so let's average it. So how are we going to do that? We'll do some reduce. We'll do some reduce. You done reduce? Reduce is my favorite. I joke, but it really is my favorite. I love how powerful it is. So we're going to use reduce. So the way we're going to do this, I think we're going to use, it's probably, so what we're going to do is we're going to add all of the ratings. So we'll do brews.reduce. And reduce, again, we're going to take the accumulator. Some people call it previous next. I like to call it the accumulator. That's what I've seen some functions. And the current brew. And we're just going to start with an initial value of 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to return ACC plus cur_brew dot rating. So we're just going through the list and each one adding the value, adding the value, adding the value, adding the value, until we're left with the total rating. And then what do we do with the total rating? We divide it by the number of brews. That's how you get n average. Clam Watson, this example is the correct use case for reduce. Yes, absolutely. Reduce is fantastic. I think if you're trying to figure out whether to use reduce, map, filter, reduce should be used when you're trying to convert an array or a list to any other data structure. If you're trying to convert it to, well, let's put it this way. If you're trying to convert a list to an object, reduce is perfect. If you're trying to convert an array to a string, reduce is perfect. An array to a number, reduce is perfect. If you're trying to combine the list of authors for an article and separate them by a comma, you could just use .join with a comma. But if you want to be cool, you could also use reduce. If you want to take an array and convert it into an object with keys, reduce. Reduce is awesome. So he says reduce is good, but not always. The most readable choice, in my opinion, sometimes overused. But that's the fault of the dev that chooses cleverness over readability. True. I think, oh, what up, Mr. Nice Cream with the raid. What up? Thanks for the raid, buddy. Awesome. Hope you guys are here and enjoying this. We're doing a little RecoilJS right now. But yeah, Mr. Nice Cream, thank you so much for the raid. That's awesome. Appreciate it. So yeah, so we just used reduce. We got the average, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and divide to actually get that average. So we're gonna return total rating divided by the number of brews that we're dealing with. So we'll do brews dot length. That's how many we have. So that should give us our total rating. And so now we have this selector that's able to get the total rating. And it's getting that again from the existing atoms. In this case, those atoms are 1 for each of our brews. So now we can use the selector to get that info. So what we'll do down here is we'll say our data there. We'll grab our I believe we just called it average rating. So we'll say const average rating equals, and then here we get to use the use recoil selector function, or use recoil value. That's what we'll be using. So use recoil value. There's no setter, again, because this is a selector. We're not setting here. We're not modifying the state or the atoms in any way. A selector is just using existing state or atoms and deriving value from them. And that's why we're not getting a setter here. And we're also going to be using the use recoil value function. So I'm just going to mark that, go up here, add that hook. There we go. Jump back down here. And go ahead and put that here. And we'll be using this. All right. So now our average rating is defined, and maybe we can even specify that. Maybe we want to say, you know, this is going to be a number, because it is. Okay, so let's see what we have, and let's see if there's any errors or anything going on, and let's see if things are working. So let's see, this is in the brew list. I think this was resolved. Let me just check. Yeah, I think that was resolved. So let's try running it in the web. All right, so there's our beautiful, beautiful design. I'm glad you are all here to see this. Mr. Nice Cream, hope you and your buddies can enjoy this amazing design that we have here. Again, this is where we're gonna get. Yo. Takes time. We'll get there. But yeah, so right now, let's see what happens to the average rating. Let's see if we did this correctly. Wow. We didn't use toFixed, everybody. That's why we have this thing. But check it out. We actually can see that it is modifying, but we have a problem. It is re-rendering each of our items. So even though we're modifying one, we're seeing that re-render. So we're not actually fixing that. And that's because we're re-rendering the brew list whenever we change the average rating. And so naturally the children are going to re-render. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and here we're going to try something out. We're going to import use memo. I believe it's called use memo. And we're going to try to memoize this thing. Oh. What did I do here? Hold on. Let me just do it the old way, and then I'll change it to use that. Let's do. Oh, that's because that's outside there. Sorry. That was all. I just needed to put it here. So let me just change that back. And it says, can I find name use memo? Because we need to add it up here. All right. Whoa. Interesting. All right, let's just scratch that. Go back to that. Let's try this out, see what happens. So here, we'll go here, close this up, go back here, open up that web browser. See what happens now. So you can see parts of it are not re-rendering, but you can still see this piece rendering and the outer container containing all the lists re-rendering. So you can see that this average rating change is going to cause the other pieces to re-render. Now, we can actually fix this too. One thing we can do is we can move this average rating out of the brew list. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual rendering of the list items. And we can still pull that info from our atoms and actually just get it so that it's only re-rendering this piece and then each individual piece. So let's do that. Let's hoist this above and outside of our flat list, because again, it's not dealing with any of the list. It's just using a derived value from the atoms of each brew item list. So let's do that. All right, so how are we gonna do that? Well, we'll create a new component. My favorite way to create a new component is to take an existing component and copy it. And then what I'll do, it just saves typing. What I'll do is we'll call this average rating. And again, this isn't in our final design. A lot of the stuff isn't in our final design, but it's just a way to test recoil and see if we're actually using it correctly. So we're going to go ahead and we got this average rating component, and we're going to basically strip out all of this stuff that we don't need. Actually, now though with React, it is pretty straightforward to just write the component from scratch because we're just dealing with functions. We don't really need to copy it. But I find it useful, because we're going to be pulling in style sheet, and it's just easy to have that stuff all done for us. So get rid of all this. We still want our selector. We definitely still want our selector. However, we're going to run into a case here where we actually don't have that list of brew IDs. So we'll move that to a constant somewhere so that we can reference that. Again, these are hard-coded right now, but they'll eventually come from a database. Maybe we'll do that on stream. We'll spin up something with Express, or maybe we'll throw like a serverless Lambda using Dynamo where we can just put some brews, store them there, and make requests. It'll also give us an opportunity to test out the asynchronous development with Recoil and see what the asynchronous story is like when dealing with Recoil. It looks pretty easy. I mean, the way they've designed this thing, it seems like it's pretty easy. It reduced a lot of boilerplate. It looks like they think of asynchronous atoms the same way they do as synchronous atoms. And I've seen in the video on the Recoil website them using React Suspense seamlessly with Recoil. So that's something we're definitely going to want to try. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and hoist these brews out to a constants file. Oops, sorry about that. Accidentally zoomed out. So let's move these up here. All right, and then we will go ahead and move our brews there. We'll export brews from here. It's the only thing in the file. So what we'll do is we'll just, maybe we'll have a single constants file at some point where we're just exporting a bunch of this stuff, but for now we'll just export default brews. Cool. From our brew list now, we're going to need to import that. Import brews from, I love the Telesend stuff. All right, so we have brews now. So that's all good. That should all work. We no longer need this. Whatever, we'll just save that. Okay, so now over here, let me close this. We're not really dealing with that right now. So for our average rating, we'll still have our selector. We just need to import that. So we'll import selector from Recoil. Great. We're going to import brews. Awesome. Brew with ID is a selector, or sorry, it's an atom that came from brew list. So we're gonna move that out. What we can do for now is we can just import it. But since we're sharing it, we'll probably want to move that out to its own file. So maybe we'll just do that now. Let's do that. Let's take our brew list atom, brew with ID, and move it to a separate file. So we'll put in atoms. We'll call it brew with ID. .ts, we'll make a TypeScript file, and we will copy this out. Maybe we just have a single file called atoms where we export all the atoms. It might get crazy. I don't know. We'll see. Again, these kinds of things, like the best practices around where things are going to go, if they're going to be in a different file. Any of you that have used Redux or really any framework realize that this stuff comes over time as people develop best practices. There's like 50 different flavors of Redux. You got Dux, you got Saga, you got Redux Loop. I'm assuming with this more simple nature of Recoil, we'll probably have like a pretty straightforward standard similar to something like TypeScript where, sometimes there's in a different type file, and usually the decision on whether you break the types out is basically just on file length. So we'll see what ends up happening, and we'll try what ends up working for us. Again, this is all open source. I'm going to push this commit at the end of this session so anyone can pull it down and make changes. And hey, if you make a change that you think is awesome, pop it in the chat or submit a PR, and we can review it on stream and kind of go over it. So that'd be really cool. All right, so again, sorry, let's get back to our brew thing here. Let's paste that there. We're just going to export default this for now. And then in our brew list, we can get rid of our, well, we can get rid of this. We're not going to be using this here. And then brew with ID, we're not using there. We're using it inside our brew item. So let's go ahead and open that up here. Brew item, brew with ID. We're going to import it from brew with ID. Again, this is going to come from our atoms folder. Atoms. Okay, so, oh, we also don't need this here, but we do need this here now. So we need to make sure we're importing that stuff. So what we'll import here is we'll import Memoization from Memoization, and we'll import atom from Recoil. Okay, so our brew, that's all set up. We got our brew item is pulling in from there. Again, we're not using that. Let's get rid of that at this point. And now our average rating can use that atom. And we can even move this selector out to another file. But because we're just using it here, we'll keep it here. All right, so we got our brews. Let's import that brew with ID function. So we're going to do import brew with ID from same place. And for some reason I've used single quotes here and double quotes there. I don't know what that's about. I will fix that up. Don't worry. I've been using double quotes because I write a lot of Elixir and other languages that default to double quotes, so I've gotten used to it. But yeah, I know JavaScript we mostly prefer, and I believe I have prettier, and my prettier is set to use double, so that's what we'll stick with. Okay, so we got our brew with ID. We don't have the brew type, but we're not doing brew list, so we're going to change this to average rating. And what we'll do is we'll get rid of all of this stuff. We'll just keep the return and the view. Again, we don't need the flat list. Return the view. We're going to keep our average rating there, and we're going to keep, we'll keep container. We'll keep average. We'll keep all the stuff about average rating. It's just its own component now. And let's grab that average rating. So for that, we're going to do average rating is use recoil value. Again, we're going to use recoil value here, and we'll import that from recoil. I'm already really liking these hooks that they've provided. I think they really are doing a great job with incorporating the built-in React capabilities. And when you watch the video, you see how they are using suspense. I mean, it's a team working right at Facebook, so you know they're going to be thinking about these things. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, you know, another state management, do we really need this? But I think it's pretty cool. I think it's always great to push and figure out what's not working and try to make things better. And Redux really did a great job. And now we're just building off, you know, those great ideas and concepts, which were built off of Elm and things that came before it. So it's cool to just keep learning, keep making things better and more developer friendly. And that's awesome. And it's cool to see a company spend time on things like that. So very nice. So for our use recoil value, we're going to be using, oh, sorry about that. We're going to use our average brew rating state. Okay. So now we have this component. So let's move our brew list and just have our brew list use this component, right? So here's the secret. Before, brew list was doing this. So it was listening for those atom changes and updating that component. Now we're just going to render this component. We're not passing this component anything. This component has its own component state. In this case, though, its component state is being super powered by that recoil selector. So it's really cool, I think. If you don't think it's cool, it's fine. All right, so let's go over here. So what do we got going on here? Brew IDs. We're not using that. Let's get rid of that. We're no longer doing that here. We don't need this. And so for average rating, instead of this, we're going to just render our average rating component. So first, we're going to import it. And we're going to render it here. Okay, now let's pop over to our simulator. Let's do it here because we haven't really used this too much today. Can't find variable brew list, and this is happening in which module? Unknown. Great, that's useful. Let's look at the web version because that'll sometimes give us more info. Cannot find brew list in average rating TSX. Ah, that's because we copied and pasted, and that's what we get. So we want average rating. Awesome. Let's go. So there we go. There's our. And the reason I'm going to use the web for this is because you'll be able to see that re-renders, but I don't see my average rating. Let's see where that is. So returning the view, styles container. Let me make sure that we have that showing up here in our brew list. Okay, let's see if we can get that to show up. Let me check the web one because that's where we're going to want to look at the renders anyway. Okay, so there's our average rating. It's showing up there. Let me see why it's not showing up here. It might just be a matter of refreshing. Interesting. Ah, you know what? When you connect one, I believe it potentially stops compiling the other one. So let's go ahead and just recompile that. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. We'll find out. Interesting. So we're not seeing it here. I wonder why. Let me try this. I'm just going to quit this. So you can use your keyboard to do like some of the shortcuts you would do on the device. So I'm using Command Shift, because I'm on Mac, Command Shift H, which was basically simulating hitting the home button. And it's not open anymore. So let's try running it again. I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. Very interesting. We may have to give it some kind of width or height for it to show up. So let's try that first. So we have flex 1 on this container. We're justifying content center, and our brew list is rendering it. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, let's take a look. We'll figure that out in a second. Let's take a look at the web one because it's definitely rendering there. We can see it here. Here's our screen. And so when I click here, bam, you can see just that brew items rendering and that average. So you see the whole list isn't re-rendering. So this is exactly what we wanted. This is awesome. We can modify our average rating because it's hooked up to the atoms for these individual components, but it's not re-rendering the whole thing. So let's talk about what's kind of happening here, because I think this is really cool. Traditionally, if you wanted to update each of these items in isolation without updating their entire list, you would have each of these individual brews have its own local component state. You would use state, or prior to that, you'd use the state with set state. Now what we are doing with Recoil is we're getting the benefit of local component state and almost using it just like local component state. I mean, look at this. We are literally just replacing the state with use recoil state. This is TypeScript, but we're now using these atoms, and we're using set brew item to set the state. So it's like we're using local component state in each of these brews, but we have the added benefit of other components being able to hook into that local component state, because it's actually in this orthogonal store sitting above our component graph. And so you don't have to, connect everything and drill in through props and have everything connected to the store. And when one thing changes, everything changes. You can actually really almost have components looking into other components' local state. And you may think, whoa, that's scary. That's kind of creepy. But I think the way they've designed this is really cool, because we have that set function that can modify an atom. And it's almost like whenever you call that set function in one place, it's calling it in every other place. So those updates are affecting the other places. And because we're using, in the case of average rating, a selector, where we're actually just grabbing properties off the state and deriving value from them, we're not modifying those local component states at all. We're just using it to inform other parts of the app. So now every part of the app can know about what's happening inside those components because they're using these atoms that are shared. So this is really cool. I'm very, very excited about this. I think this is going to be awesome. We're getting to 11 o'clock now, so we'll probably stop here for the day. But I'm definitely looking forward to actually building this out further now that we have the basic recoil setup going. What we'll do in the next session is we'll get rid of some of this UI that we're not really using. We were just kind of using it to test recoil, and we'll start building out some of those actual features. So I think the first thing we'll try to start with is this form. So we're going to want a form that lets us add a brew, and it's going to be really cool to see what that's like. Here, let me move my thing over so you can see it there. So we have this form where we can add a brew, we put a name, a style. Maybe we'll have a list of styles of different options. Maybe we'll make them, let them type the style, a rating and a description. And what's going to be cool is when we create a brew, we're going to have to dynamically create a new atom. So it'll be this really cool creation of new atoms on the fly. And also at some point, we're going to want to be able to delete and remove and edit. So seeing what that's like and how that works with atoms is going to be, I think, really cool. I know I'm saying atoms a lot, and it's funny because atoms is also in names. It sounds like I'm talking about a lot of people named Adam. But we're talking about recoil atoms. So yeah, so I think we'll call it here for tonight. Thank you so much for hopping in the stream. I'm going to, again, post this video on YouTube. I will link that. I have in the description, I'll have the link to the GitHub, and I'll just post that in the chat right now just in case. Let me just go ahead and grab that. So again, Tom McGurl on GitHub. My Twitter is @TomMcGurl, which you'll also see there on my stream. And there's the link to the GitHub repo. Again, pull it down, check it out, mess with it a little bit. If you want to submit a PR, we could talk about it on stream. But for next week, what we're going to be doing is, again, we're going to dive in and just try to start creating this form. I don't know if we're going to use any libraries for the forms. We'll probably start out with just using the React Native built-in forms. But this will give us a chance to actually play with the recoil atoms in a more dynamic way, creating them, removing them on the fly. And hey, maybe we'll even add the splash screen so it actually starts to look like a real app. And here's the simulator still over here without that average, so I'll have to figure that out as well. So thanks again for tuning in the stream. Again, if you like what you see, hit the like button, give me a follow. I really appreciate it. But again, I'm just here to code and share what I'm doing along with you. I'm here learning, and I hope you're all learning something. So yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you next time. I'm going to try to stick to a schedule of Tuesdays. I'm going to do 9 to 11, and we'll see how that goes. If I add days, that'd be awesome. So we'll see how that goes. Clam Watson, thanks to the Poggers. Mr. Nice Cream, thanks again for the raid. Really appreciate it. Nice. All right, take care. Everyone enjoy your night.